All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. I am so glad you're here. Today, you have an amazing opportunity because you are going to hear from an absolutely incredible guest. We've got a guy on who has just been blowing up the media world, not just social media, but he's been blowing up media everywhere. He's been on morning news broadcast, national morning news broadcast. He's been on local news broadcasts. He's been in the newspaper. He has been on social media. He's kind of everywhere because his story is a powerful one. I've got a guy on today who is going to share a journey with us that is not necessarily that straight line trajectory that we're all used to hearing about when we hear about success or homegrown success stories. We've got a guy here who has gone up and down, round and round to make the world a better place. But right now, he is absolutely killing it. I am so glad today that we get Michael Atkins on to share his story with us. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
David, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So there might be a couple people who've just been living under a rock and don't know who you are or what your story is all about. Can you just take a few minutes and introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, my name is Michael Atkins. I tell everyone that I am from Park Hill, Denver, Colorado. I am an educator. I'm an educator at heart. In my current school district, Denver Public Schools, I've worn many different hats, starting with student. I've been a part of this district, I tell everyone, since I was 4 years old. As a student, after I graduated from high school, I sought out opportunities within the school district. And that trajectory did not look like most, right? I started out as a custodian within my district and wore many different hats between custodian and where I'm at now as principal. But just an interesting route, I guess I would say.
It is an interesting route, and just those two little nuggets that you threw out there is kind of what has helped bring you to this platform where you're telling your story to so many people right now. You've been dubbed the custodian turned principal, as though it's almost the Cinderella story, if you will. But I don't necessarily see it that way. So you say you're a school principal, and I'm sure that you could probably attest to this too. Probably some of the most valuable people you have in your school are those school custodians. They know every kid, they know every nook and cranny, they know what's happening. So can you just talk to why did you take that leap first? Why was that the first opportunity you did to jump into your school system and say, yeah, custodian, that's going to be a fit for me?
Well, actually, I was seeking a teacher aide position, a paraprofessional position. And when I would walk in the principal's offices, those during that time in the neighborhood that I grew up in, I don't think I fit the mold as far as what principals wanted in their building as a teacher's aide at that time. I was offered a custodian position instead, took that custodian position and built authentic relationships with staff members, community members, and the babies, and just made me more and more hungry to be a part of their lives and a part of their educational career.
It's interesting to me. You said that you started in this same school system when you were 4 years old. Mm-hmm. Yet once you left the school system, you didn't necessarily fit the mold for what they were looking for. Can you expound a little bit more on that?
Yeah, the neighborhood that I'm from is during the time when I was growing up, it was predominantly African American and Latino community. And, a young Black man seeking a paraprofessional job at that moment was not something that was, I would say, popular, right? And there was times within me growing up and going through the school system where I was looked at as just that, a young Black man. I think, which was difficult, right? Perceived just by the way that I look and not what I can offer the world, and really having to fight through that, through this whole little journey.
I think that that's going to be like a major theme that comes out of here is how people perceive you versus the reality. I talked just in that intro that your story resonates with people because it's custodian turned principal, as though it's a rags to riches type of story. But that might not necessarily be what it is. You said as soon as you left high school, you wanted to be in education, but yet societal norms might not have aligned. And I think it's interesting. You just described yourself as a Black man trying to step into an educator's role, and even that was a struggle. Ed Week today. I'm looking at it right now on my phone. There was a story that came out in Education Week today that says the average teacher in America today is a 43-year-old white woman. 79.3% of public school teachers are white.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting little paradigm, because the job of education is to prepare people for what's next, to prepare them for the real world, if you will. But the real world is not a bunch of 43-year-old white women. I mean, the real world is very diverse. So why do you feel like that was a stumbling block? Or why was that something that people looked at you and said, maybe not now, maybe custodian is a better fit?
Yeah, I just think that's the norm, right? When we talk about norms within our society, we tend to hold on to those norms, and we tend to navigate through what is normal in society, and you know, I think you kind of outlined it there, right? That it's important to understand that we live in a diverse society and a diverse world, right? And when we say that the average teacher is a 43-year-old white woman, um, how does that align with the children that we serve, right?
Yeah.
How do children see themselves? Do their teachers, right? How do all children have representation of not only gender, but of language and of race, and can see themselves not only within the school, but within curriculum as well,
Yeah.
right? When I think about my time as a custodian, like I grew so much as an individual and as a human being just within that moment, probably more than any of my time within education, right? Because I truly saw how the young African American boys looked at me, right? I truly saw how authentic those relationships were. And that's where I started to hold on to, I need to have access to these students in a way outside of them just seeing me as a custodian, because I think they see me as a friend, as a confidant, and they trust me. And the relationships that we had were extremely authentic.
That's powerful that you mentioned how the kids saw you is what drove you to keep going. I'm curious how you saw yourself. I can only imagine. So I'm a 43-year-old white man.
Mhm.
So it's a different world. People would say that the red carpet is rolled out for people like me, and I see that the air of privilege that I truly do walk in. I understand it and I acknowledge it. I can only imagine when I left school, and if I went to interview for a teacher position or a teacher's aide position, if somebody looked at me and said, no, but how about custodian?
Mhm.
I would have said, peace out, I'm done. I'm going somewhere else.
Right.
But you stuck with it and said, no, this is it. This is a stepping stone for me, or this is the place where I am called to.
Mhm.
Did you truly see that, or did you look at it as though they were trying to knock you down?
Well, I think we talked about what's normal in society, and I think um, those obstacles that individuals of color constantly have to face is just that, right?
Mm.
It's just other individuals trying to define your story. And I always held on to what my mother and my grandmother always told me, right? Like, don't let someone define your story, you define your own story.
Yeah.
And although your trajectory might have to look a little different, right? You can always overcome and persevere and do whatever you want to do in this life.
And that's awesome. So you accepted the job and said, all right, I'll be a custodian. I'll come in and I'll clean the classrooms, clean up after the babies, do my thing. But yet, did you still hold on to, but this isn't where I'm going to stay? And did you know all along I'm going to be doing something different?
Of course, of course. I didn't know when that time would come. I was going to school at that moment for business.
Hmm.
And although the relationships I had with students were very authentic, I did not know at that time that I would be dedicating my entire life to education. It was the moment where I got promoted in the custodial work from one school to another, and I went from a part-time custodian to a full-time custodian, and then a full-time custodian to assistant facility manager. And when I got promoted to the assistant facility manager, I walked into the school, and you always walk into the school, and the first person that you are introduced to is the principal. And I walk into the principal's office, and I lock eyes with the principal, and it's that defining moment of I recognize you, right? And it was my second grade teacher was the principal at the school that I was promoted to.
Wow.
And she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm the new assistant facility manager here." And we sat down. She asked about my family. Just it was just the authentic relationship that we had. And after that, a few weeks into the position, we sat down for our first monthly facilities manager meeting, where we walked the grounds and talk about everything. And she said, "Well, what's going on with you?" And I said, "Well, I've been seeking a paraprofessional position." And we didn't talk too much about it in depth. And a few weeks later, she offered me a paraprofessional position, and I was just I was in love with truly being a different part of a child's academic at the time. And I changed my my major from business to behavioral science, and a minor in K-5 education, and sought out on this journey.
Hmm. Wow, man, I've got goosebumps in this right now. It's because of your second grade experience. What kind of student were you in second grade?
I'm biased for sure. uh, I was relational. I've always been relational.
Huh.
Um, um, I had complete trust in my educators. I think that was during a time where in this country it was really polarizing, right?
Mm.
I think the culture of everything was to say, "Oh, I don't see race.
Right.
I don't define people through language. We're all Americans and we're all the same," right? Which, in a lot of ways, is not really celebrating the
Mm-hmm.
differences that we all come to the table with. So I really didn't notice, I guess, in the second grade that we were all different. Really, I noticed that I was bused to a neighborhood that looked totally different than mine, and I understood that. Um, that individuals spoke different languages and had different cultures, but was still pushed into this polarizing society as well, right?
Wow.
So I think I was a great student. I went to school every day. It was just routine. Didn't really think anything of it.
Yeah. But it makes me remember a quote that I heard recently, that the job of educators isn't just to prepare students for life in the future. Students are living their lives today. So whether they're in second grade or 10th grade, truly the experiences that they have right now could impact their future down the road. Yeah, I've got 4 of my own personal kids, and I'm facing that battle right now with which each of them in the world we're in right now, where they're saying, does this even matter? Do I have to? It's not going to count. But you're proof positive that truly a relationship that you formed in second grade had a major impact on the trajectory of your career, not just because of the academic content you learned, but because of the relationship you formed. I mean, that's powerful.
Yeah, I think that's it's so important to build those authentic relationships. And I had no idea at the time as a student, right, that this relationship that I'm building with my teacher in the second grade will impact my life,
Right.
right? And I think that is something that we all need to hold on to, is this understanding of the relationships that we form with one another, and um, how those relationships will impact you on a day-to-day basis, or even 20 to 30 years down the road.
Wow. That's cool. That's super cool. So you became a paraprofessional working with students in the academic world, and it starts to fill you up so much so that you switch course and say, okay, this is going to be the focus of my formal education. Um, so what happened? What happened from there?
um, Finished my coursework up, and landed a job at an elementary school, in Southwest Denver, and was serving a different population of families and communities. And I've always been one to make sure that I'm building my capacity and I'm navigating as a learner often, and how, and reflecting on how I'm serving the babies that I'm currently in front of every day. You know, I think we talked about this understanding of not being polarizing, and being culturally responsive as a teacher as well. So um, the community and population I was serving was predominantly English language learners, and I was constantly reflecting, how how can I build my capacity to better serve them? So I sought out a master's degree in linguistic diverse education from the classroom, just so I could have more tools within my tool belt to be able to serve my student population.
Wow. So you started out yourself because you thought this is something I need to do. But that seems to be your trajectory through life, is you're constantly looking for those opportunities and you're feeding yourself so that you can grow, but not just so you can grow for your future, but so that you can grow in your current reality, wherever it is that you are. You're
Hmm.
saying, I'm going to feed myself so I can be as strong as I am right where I am.
Right.
Do you feel like that's kind of your MO, is you focus on the now, and because you're doing such an amazing job in the now, opportunities open up for you?
Most definitely, right? I'm always just reflecting on how I can serve my community better, and what 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 is. I try to often be reflective, right, in that space of how can I navigate as a learner,
Mm.
so I can show up as a knower for my community, and within that, like, what is the culture of responsive? Um, uh, I guess techniques that I need to really be aware of, so I can make sure that I'm serving all.
Wow.
Right.
At what point did you flip the script and say, okay, leadership, designated leadership with a placard, a title, and an office is the next step for you?
You know, I was in the classroom, and I was so content in the classroom, and I love being an educator, and I love um, serving my babies on a day-to-day basis. And you know, I was reading articles, just like you just brought up, right? I was reading articles and really doing some deep reflection on how can I impact students of color on a larger basis, and be that face
Mm.
for students? And then how can I create a school to make sure that students have a different experience than what I had as a student, right? I remember my elementary career was all positive. I can't really think of too many negative uh, uh, situations or times in elementary. But I do remember in middle school, I started to notice that we were treated different, right?
Mm.
Being bused from my neighborhood to, you know, when I was in school, it was Wilford Keys versus District 1. And that was a desegregation of schools case that happened in right in my neighborhood in Denver Public Schools. And it was the first desegregation of schools case outside the South.
Mm.
It was the first in collaboration with African American families and Hispanic Latino families. Um, and what it was about equality at the time, right? Resources, not equity. It was about, hey, these students in the Park Hill neighborhood do not have the same access to resources as students in other neighborhoods.
Mm.
So that the outcomes of that case was busing, busing in my district. And like I said, I was bused from my neighborhood to a predominantly white neighborhood for elementary. Um, Same for middle school. And I started to realize when I was in middle school that there were differences,
Mm-hmm.
right? That the adults in the building did treat us differently than the students that were from the neighborhood in that community, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember overhearing teachers say things like, here's the bus students,
Mm.
and here comes the bus students. Or I remember specifically all of the neighborhood students on the first floor of the school, and then the Hispanic students on one wing of the second floor, and then the Black students on the other wing of the second floor. And even though like we were part of this desegregation of schools case, we were segregated within schools.
Wow.
Right? So then I started to truly notice that there were these differences, and the interactions between students were different just based on who you were, what you look like. I remember as well, like the neighborhood kids being on the first floor, and that's where all the GT classrooms were as well, right? So we didn't really have the opportunity and or the access to those academic resources that we were fighting so hard for at the
Yeah.
time, right? So um, I I'm in this whole thing, right? I started to realize like I want to make sure that students do not have the same experiences that I had as as a school student, right?
Yeah.
And how can I make that happen? How can I make a impact on a larger scale? Um, so yeah, I sought out an opportunity to be a Ritchie intern, and that was Denver Public Schools in collaboration with the University of Denver. Um, it was their internship slash principal um, uh, master's course.
Mm. Your story is powerful to me for so many different ways and so many different reasons, but I'm making this connection in my mind, what I hope it's okay to go with, but it reminds me of the Scarlet Letter, for those of you that read that back in high school, where, a woman has to walk around with this big red A as a label and an identity, a new identity, because other people cast it upon her based
Right.
off of what they perceived. Um, And in schools, we are notorious for passing out labels, not just first grade student, third grade student, but GT, gifted and talented student, at-risk student, special education student, all the multiple labels within special education. But there's even those subtle labels, those kids, the school of choice kids, the bust kids, and all of those labels become identities that we start to wear. And you mentioned back when you were a custodian, you knew that students were looking at you and you were a face to them, and you were becoming a new label or a new identity or some new perception in their world of what could happen. So I'm wondering, because perceptions and labels oftentimes are not just cast upon ourselves. We don't necessarily give ourselves our names. Other people give us our names and our identities. People like me. So again, I described myself to the audience, might look at you and say, your story is a story of overcoming. That's a story of persistence and grit, and somebody that came from meager beginnings and made it, or whatever theme they want to put on it. I'm wondering if there are other people that look at your story and say, no, man, this is a story of a guy who forgot his roots and forgot where he came from and tried to leave what his lot in life was supposed to be. Do people ever cast that label upon you?
No, I am just so connected to my community and the individuals that I grew up with, and have just this tight bond, to where more than anything, what I hear is just a celebration.
That's awesome.
How can we continue to push this forward? How can we support Mike in this journey? How can we ensure that he has this impact, not only on our community, but on multiple communities?
That's sweet, man. Your story reminds me, I don't know if you know the name Andre Ingram, or if any of the listeners know Andre Ingram. Andre Ingram was a guy who spent 11 years in the NBA's G League. The G League is where it's like their developmental league. So people that aren't drafted, it's kind of like the minor leagues, if you will. This guy spent more than a decade in the G Leagues. And then he gets called up, and in his NBA premiere scores 19 points playing against the big guys. And his story made national headlines because it was a story of persistence and grit. Most people in the G League last for a year or two before they either make it out or they just give up their dream. But he said, no, man, I'm sticking with it because my story is going to resonate with people. Your story reminds me of that. You said, no, I'm going to do this, not just for me, but for other people. I want other people to realize that they can do this as well. So I wonder, in your current situation, your current experience, you keep calling your students your babies, which I absolutely love that. Not all of your babies probably have the cheerleaders that you have or that you had, the people that are there to hold them up and pull them up and to say, I got you. Right. Or they might not have experience to that second grade teacher like you had, who a couple of decades later on said, oh, I remember you, let's do something.
Right.
So how do you hope to inspire and pull those kids up? I'm using those kids, meaning the kids that might not have the same environment, the same culture, the same family friendships that you have been blessed to have.
Well, now they do.
Boom. That's it, man.
Now they do. I make sure that I put love, community, diversity, inclusion, and equity all in this pot every single day for my students and my families, and we serve it up as gumbo, right? And within our school. Each and every one of my teachers, I want to make sure that they understand who they are, right? What are their biases, and how those biases either positively or negatively impact our student body each and every day. Each and every one of my teachers this year, staff members, including my custodians and my office staff, my kitchen managers, we all took the intercultural development inventory assessment. And what is so important about that is it identifies where you're at on a continuum by answering it's a 50-item questionnaire. Um, and it tells you how you, I think the key to it is it identifies your perceived intercultural development and your developmental intercultural development on this continuum, right? And everyone's perceived orientation is way higher than their actual developmental orientation. And that's the gap in this world that we have to fill.
Yeah.
Right. It identifies how you show up around cultures that are different than you.
Right.
Right. And that's the gap that we are trying to fill at our school on a daily basis. You know, every staff meeting, every Friday, we call it Culture Fridays, where we have one individual just share out identity. It shares with the group their own culture, their values, what made them who they are today. And then one thing that they are strategically doing and reflecting on a daily basis to fill that gap between their developmental orientation and their perceived orientation. It's hard for individuals to engage in equity work,
right?
Because no one thinks that they have work to do. Everyone thinks that their perceived orientation is much higher than their developmental orientation.
I love the fact that you bring that to the table and you just make it explicit in your staff. I've said before that taboo topics only exist at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Everywhere
Right.
else, man, we got to talk about it and own it, because that's how we grow. Whether it's simple stuff, and I say simple, got like grading procedures. I mean, that's a big topic in some schools to talk about that, because you're talking about values.
Right.
But even what you're talking about, just biases of people in general. I mean, that is huge. And I can only imagine when you brought that to the table and said, okay, this is where we're going. I can imagine the reactions both internally and externally from staff members as they started doing this dance. Is this where you see the conversation continuing next year and into the future?
Yes, work that we have to do every single days of our lives, right? And
Yeah.
I told my teachers, this isn't about you as an educator. This is my investment in you as an individual, as a person, right? Because this has to live not only inside of these walls, but outside of these walls as well, right? You said it earlier, right? Most of our teachers, 77% of our teachers are white women, middle-aged white women, right? If we don't understand who we are as individuals and then how that impacts the community that we serve, then we're not doing our babies justice, right? We're not being culturally responsive.
Yeah. And it's not an indictment on 43-year-old white women. It's not at all. It's just an acknowledgement of, like you said, our biases that we all have, and how we use our biases both to our advantages and our disadvantages when serving other people. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Right.
Well, so what's next for you, man? Or are you at the place where you're like, man, I've done it all? Or do you have other dreams? Or are you just living in your reality right now?
Just currently living in my reality. I'm at a school that I would say historically the last 5 to 10 years wasn't a sought out school.
Yeah.
Right. And we are changing that trajectory. Our data, the data that we're seeing in math and in literacy is top 10 in my district now. And it's just so great to see. I'm a true firm believer that we cannot, without that work that we just talked about, then we cannot create a space where children can be their authentic selves, where they're comfortable, where they can learn, where they can flex critical thinking skills, where they can do any of that. Because school cannot be about compliance.
Boom.
right?
So many truths in this, man, that I am relating to. My last job was at a turnaround elementary school, if you will, down in Florida that had a history of underperformance. And there
Right.
were a lot of people that came and said, no, the script to turn things around is more worksheets, more compliance, more drill and kill, just test prep. And you are proving the point that no, that's not what it is. The answer is get kids to believe in who they are, focus on their strengths, have adults who believe in who those kids are, and accept that we can grow from any situation to better who we are as people, and collectively that grows our school. And I mean, you're living that right now, and I love that story. Love it.
100%. Yeah, thank you.
So I ask all of my guests on this show, at the end of every episode, to deliver for us what we call the mic drop moment, because there are some people who might be driving on vacation, driving home from work, maybe they're just sitting down with a cup of coffee or mowing the lawn, and there's been so much that's been brought out in this conversation that people are going to be resonating on, but I want that last thing that they hear from you to be that thing that sticks with them for a while. That thing that they're like, man, this is what Mike Atkins was all about, and this is how I'm going to change my destiny, my reality, my thought process, whatever it is. So the floor is yours right now, Mike. What is your mic drop moment?
Just like one thing that I hold on to every single day, and I tell my community on a daily basis, whether it's in celebration or it's reflecting on how we need to get better. You know, adversity in life, regardless of who you are, right? Adversity in life is guaranteed.
Mm.
Perseverance is a choice.
Wow.
Right? And we always have that choice. There will be roadblocks along the way. There will be obstacles, right? Some obstacles we'll have to climb over. Some obstacles we'll have to go under. Some obstacles we'll have to go straight through. But adversity is a choice. Adversity is not a choice, right? It's guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Perseverance is a choice. So continue to persevere and create innovative ways of getting around and through your obstacles.
That's awesome, and so good, and so timely, and so needed for myself personally. I appreciate that wisdom. I appreciate your story, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy, crazy, chaotic schedule, the leader of all the things, both at home and in school, and with so many of us, just to share your story and inspire people, really across the country, man. You're killing it, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, David. It takes educators like you to create a platform where individuals can spread some love, optimism, and cheer through this time. I think every day is we have that choice to navigate either from half empty or half full, right? And it's important to understand that there's always a bright side as well. So thank you for creating the platform and the space.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine, man. All mine. Thank you so much.